So it's time now for our panel on deployment of electric vehicles in last mile. We are all talking about sustainability and social cost of all the logistics and supply chain related operations that are happening today. And therefore, we decided that now with a lot of government intervention in transportation and with a lot of companies coming in the electric vehicle space and with a lot of companies also having targets of having electric vehicles in their fleet, we thought it is only right to have this panel today. So please, I once again call Mr. Sanjay Desai to moderate this panel on deployment of electric vehicles in last mile. Mr. Sanjay Desai. And with a round of applause, please call our panel members. Dr. Arunachalam R. He's the MD and CEO, IBOB, and Board of Director at SF Logistics Private Limited. We have Jawahar. He's the Head of Fulfillment and Logistics at Vehicle Food and Products. Hansveer Chandhok, Director at Syndicate Auto. And Nitin, Varkey, Vice President, Strategic Projects, Organization Excellence and Innovations at Blue Dart. A big round of applause for them, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Charu. The reason I'm sitting is a couple of responses they got was very surprising, but they said, don't walk too much. The light is shining like hell on my head. So I said, okay, let me sit, okay? So that's the reason that you see me sitting here. Yeah, it's a lovely compliment. When the light shines, what else you want, right? Excellent. So guys, self-introductions from you. Dr. Arun, starting from you.
Thank you so much. Celerity, Sanjay, Arunachalam. I head the business of supply chain for SF Logistics, India brand IBOB.
Hi. Please don't search for my name in the screen. I'm a surprise panelist now. I'm Jawahar. I head fulfillment and logistics for Vehicle Foods and Product. I have close to 20 years of experience in automobile industry, starting from production, operations, then moving on to planning, then logistics. In my last stint, I was heading outbound logistics for Ashok Leyland. Then I moved on to Vehicle Foods and Products a couple of years before. That's it about me. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Hansveer. I'm the founder of Syndicate Motors. We manufacture low-cost electric vehicles, basically. And my background is essentially auto ancillary. I'm a part of the largest manufacturer of windscreen wipers in India. And we supply them to pretty much all OEs in India. And we also supply exhaust systems for Tata Motors. And all the Tata Ace vehicles have pretty much our exhaust systems. So for us, the EV was basically a transition that once the ICE vehicle goes the way of the dinosaur, I mean, what do we do after that? So if you can't beat them, join them.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Nitin Varkey, and I look after project management, organizational excellence, and innovations for Blue Dart. I think it's a pleasure being here, and look forward to having a very interactive session with you.
Thank you so much, guys. EV has always been under a lot of interest, right? Everybody wants to know what is happening on EV. India government has got a lot of subsidies, a lot of initiatives going. So let's start with the ecosystem. And Dr. Arun, do we have the basic ecosystem, or we need to create it so that we can design, launch, and operate India, especially considering the rural population and the rural area, right? We have charging stations, EV battery shortages, and everything, and all of the reasons that we may have not to do so.
There is an interest and aspiration to completely go electric across nooks and corners of India. I come from a village which is in Tamil Nadu, close by to a place called Mannargudi. We get buses once in an hour to my village. So we need to time ourselves very well to catch the bus, go to my village. So therefore, from there to the level of 10 minutes delivery that we are all enjoying in such cities, to the EV launch is something that as phase we need to take up probably in life. Really appreciate the central government initiatives in terms of driving all these excellences on par, like the developed countries. We have to really go a little long way, but I think we are all determined to do, because the customers, the corporate customers are really very, very keen to drive all these initiatives, especially on the EV segment. So therefore, the lower rung of vehicles are now available. As we move on, I think the big players like Tata's would come into existence to produce more and more. Thanks to you also who are producing in the smaller segments. It's a question of time, is what we feel. Today we may not be ready, but that may sound very negative. I don't want to say it, but we are poised to deploy this, not only in Tier 1, the metro cities, Tier 2 and Tier 3 going forward.
Yeah. Dr. Arun, you mentioned corporate customers. I don't know whether I got it wrong, but why is that so?
Some of my corporate customers are here, one sitting next to you, next to me, one sitting from Apollo Tires who was in the panel. So they're all corporate customers. Going to be corporate customers are also sitting there. Their expectations and drive towards such eco-friendly activities are very high. They really want to make this change happen. That's why I said.
Perfect, perfect. And getting Nitin, in terms of the right focus, right? And I want to kind of get it right. EV revolution is focused on metros and mini metros, whereas our actual consumer, and that's why I was harping on corporate actually, whereas the actual consumer is in Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, where the travel radius is 15 to 20 kilometers. Now, there has been a lot of talk about whether the consumer can ride 150, 180 kilometers after electrification. Keeping that aside, are we as an industry, or even policymakers, or even corporate customers, addressing the problem at the root?
Very good question, Sanjay. And rightfully, as you said, I think today the focus is primarily in the metros. Having said that, I think close to about 70% of our population comes from the rural Tier 2, Tier 3 kind of locations. And the infrastructure over there, whether it's public transport, like Dr. Arun said, all of it is very scarce, right? Even although households may have their, petrol-powered or diesel-powered vehicles, but the escalating cost of fuel and the pumps are far and few in between. So this is where EVs will come into the picture, right? The other thing is, I think from a timing perspective, it is the right time, because with the focus of government on the electrification of rural areas, I think this is the right time. If you go around, you can see solar panels on most rooftops today. The charging of electric vehicles is not a very far away dream for the rural India and the rural consumer. So I think that the focus, as much as it needs to be in the metros, should also be in the rural area, and that's where we need to go. Some surprising facts: we all know that between 2022 and 2021, there has been a spike in the EV sales, 2 to 5% across all the segments. And surprisingly though, if you look at some statistics from Vahan, the top 10 districts, the sales or the contribution of EVs in sales has dropped by close to about 50% from last year. The contribution, okay? Although the sales have gone up, but the contribution has reduced. And it is the rural markets that's actually bringing this up, that's covering the gap. So yes, there is focus. There is that drive towards it. Now, how far that goes and what is the kind of escalation in it would depend on the infrastructure around the batteries, around the charging infrastructure, the entire ecosystem, definitely the financial schemes attached to it, and most importantly, the awareness around it. I think these are some of the driving factors that will take us there.
Yeah, great, Nitin. Top line, bottom line has always been and should always be the first prerogative. But keeping money part aside, and let's bringing environment into the picture.
Right.
And combine that with exposure or requirement in rural. Do they go hand in hand? Because as I understand, our environment pollutions are not in the rural areas, they are in the city areas because of industrialization, modernization, and vehicles, right, the current vehicles. So again, is it a wrong strategy that you want to ply your electric vehicles in rural market because there is a demand there, and because EVs will reduce environmental pollution, which we know in rural there is not much of an environmental pollution. How do you piece this together?
So I think it's always going to drive from your highest markets where you have the maximum deployment to the lower segments. So definitely the focus is going to be on the metros. But having said that, being a corporate citizen, I think we have to look at it holistically, and wherever that we operate, there will always be an aspiration to go there, sequentially. It's always going to be in a phased manner.
Perfect, perfect.
Can I please add to this, if you don't mind?
Of course, please go ahead.
So actually, speaking of the rural areas, the most I feel the vehicle taking charge as far as EV revolution is concerned is a very unglamorous L3 electric rickshaws or tuk-tuks as we call them, which we also manufacture. And these have already proliferated, these have already spread across basically most of the rural areas. And if you go to any small town or any small city, tier 3 cities and small towns, you will find a plethora of these vehicles plying about and taking people from their houses or central locations to work and back. So I feel even though it's not talked about much because lithium ion is in, and it's obviously the most sustainable way of doing things. But the charge of the EV revolution in India is probably the electric three-wheeler, which is again the entry level
Absolutely agree.
money bringer for the
Absolutely agree. The focus is currently on the passenger segment. There is a distance that we have to travel to get it into the cargo segment, which there is a lot of work happening by the corporates and also by the government to that effect. And surely, I mean, in the near future, we will see a revolution there.
Perfect, perfect.
Just want to add one quick point here. Since you touched upon the profitability issue. See, sustainability cannot come with charity, right? It has to come with profitability. Then only there will be meaning, then only there will be intention for companies to go about it. We used to say in our company always, like, any climate smart solution should always also be business smart, right? And we have demonstrated it, and I would explain it later when my turn comes in, right? So just wanted to add that point that sustainability cannot come with charity and it has to always come with profitability. Then only it will make sense for any corporate to go about it.
Very well said.
Sustainability cannot come with charity. Anyone? Any sustainable? Very true. Okay.
Probably except the government.
Probably except the government. Anyone else? Yeah. Mr. Jalan.
Why should the cost be put on the logistics itself? I mean, so let's say if a company is making 100 rupees profit and it invests in, a simple example, it invests in your electric vehicles, which adds 20 rupees more to the cost structure. But at the end of the day, you're making 80 rupees. So you're trying to look at profitability from the EV deployment. So that sustainability cannot come if you isolate it. But that you're looking at your life. What about 1, 2, 3, 4 generations down?
Classic. All right. We'll stay the debate there.
Would government subsidies count as charity? I mean, like, so the EV revolution is being fueled by government subsidies around the world, including tax credits and stuff. Even in India, we have a FAME subsidy, plus every country, every state has its own subsidy, right? So that's, I mean, that would count as charity, right?
I'm coming to you.
At some level.
Let's talk about Make in India. And can you highlight some of the measures that India government has launched to produce the components? We don't have components, right? The chips, the lithium ion cells, and as well as the battery pack. It can be a gating item, the battery pack.
Actually, one thing that I really need to appreciate about our current government is their focus on Make in India. and how a lot of technologies and processes are being localized and a lot of incentives are being given to bring production to India and in turn the technology is related to production. So there are a few things that they're doing. The main thing is I think the PLI incentives that have recently been introduced. So these have been introduced at two levels. One's at the vehicle level, which covers your components, basically like motors, drivetrains, entire vehicles, and other advanced technology components. And the other is at the ACC level, that's the advanced cell chemistry level. So they're trying to get companies and to introduce local cells because that I think is the weakest link for us right now because all the cells in India are currently being imported, whether it be from China, Japan, Korea, or Taiwan. So those incentives are really, pushing companies to set up local plants. I think Exec is one company who's doing it. Amaraja, I've heard, is doing it. I heard Tata Chemicals was getting into it. So there are a lot of companies who are taking that initiative and getting into it. And obviously the government subsidies really help.
Sure.
I believe like for EV vehicles, they're offering like 8 to 11% plus another 5% if it's in EV for local manufacturing of the revenue, annual revenues. And then obviously there are requirements of local content. Apart from this, we all know about the FAME subsidies. So the FAME subsidies again have like a very high local content requirement, which again forces people to sort of localize and buy local and develop local components. A lot of companies were sort of bypassing these rules by using second, third, fourth tier suppliers who would import from China and then supply it to the tier one manufacturer. But now I think the government is taking more actions and in ensuring that everything is local.
Yeah.
And they are doing checks up to the third tier. So you can't game the system basically.
Yeah. We'll keep the incentives part a little later for you. But I have a question is, does it mean that the rare earths which we don't have and China has, which is lithium, bauxite and a few others, are we going to develop an alternate mode of raw material to make a battery, or we're going to do something on the lithium and bauxite manufacturing? And
so this has to be a multifaceted approach. I mean, India is already tying up with different countries, including China, Argentina and stuff, to source, to source lithium from them. But there are also a lot of companies which are working on sodium-ion batteries that will replace lithium. So sodium is, as we all know, is really abundant. It's pretty much everywhere in the world. So and I think Indian companies have also worked on ferrophosphate batteries, which again replace lithium with iron. And again, it just depends on the application.
Yeah.
Because ferrophosphate is a really heavy battery with a shorter lifespan. So maybe for a grid tie solution that makes sense. But again, for sodium ion, as it develops, would probably replace lithium.
Perfect. A bit too much of technology there. Coming to Jawahar, and since you talked about the bottom line and you said you want to add value, so it is argued that EV vehicle is out of budget for most buyers that we say. And what do you think companies who manufacture EVs need to do different to change this thinking from a cost perspective?
Right. Let me start from the opposite point. EVs are capital extensive, right? The simple reason being, see, if you take an analogy, for an ICE vehicle, in the total cost of ownership, the initial investment would be say 8 to 9%, not more than that, right? When it comes to EV, it goes up to 33, 34%, right? So naturally, it is capital extensive, right? So what is the solution for it? That's where the mobility partners come in, right? Mobility partners can come in, take the vehicles from the OEM, or in some cases, the OEMs themselves act as a mobility partner, and the product is given as a service, right? As a pay-per-use model, right? This is a direct analogy from what happened in passenger vehicles. If you see, all the passenger buses that runs in our city are not bought by the government. It is on a pay-per-kilometer basis, right? It is on an OPEX model. So for commercial EVs to get the mileage and get the footage that it is needed and to scale up, this is the only way going about is on an OPEX model where the OEM or the mobility partners step in and offer the vehicle as a product, not as a product, but as a service to end customers and logistics service providers, which will in turn increase the implementation and deployment more.
Sure. That's good for OEMs and enterprise. What about if you're making a two-wheeler to a direct customer?
See, two-wheeler again comes into passenger segment. We have to segregate EVs, our perception about EVs into passenger and commercial vehicle, right? When it comes to passengers, all government subsidies, everything will work because it is going to be a single person who's going to decide on the subsidy, what I'm going to get out of it, so he's going to buy it. But when it comes to a commercial vehicle, everything boils down to the unit cost, right? We were talking about FAME 1, FAME 2, all those stuff, right? I would take an example from the state of California where they have taken out of the battery weight out of the GVW of the vehicle. That gives more pull for the vehicles to be bought. Say, for example, if the vehicle's GVW is 10 tons and the battery weight for a, say, 150 kilowatt vehicle, if it is going to be, say, 2 tons, and if that is taken out of the GVW and your unit cost is going to be on par with or even lesser than the IC vehicle, what is going to give you? So that kind of incentive will pull more sales rather than a subsidy.
Okay. Good comment. Anyone? Any comment here?
Actually, it's already there in India. Like if you look at the redirectors for L3 vehicles and L5 vehicles,
Yes.
it mentions specifically that the GVW is without the battery. So yeah, I think L7 as well. So most of these vehicles, they already mentioned that the GVW is minus the battery.
Sorry, my bad, I didn't know.
Anyone? Any comment? There was one? No. Okay. So Hansveer, coming to you in terms of EV incentives, just now you said, right? And taking off from the previous answer. Are EV incentives applicable for enterprise and passengers, consumers? They are different or same, or what is the impact on EV adoption in both the segments?
So yes and no, like there are certain incentives which are applicable across the range, specifically the incentives which are for the manufacturers.
Yes.
So FAME subsidy goes directly to the manufacturer, not to the customer. So that obviously everyone benefits from. Same with the GST. EVs basically only take what 5% GST as opposed to 12% or whatever other levels are. So those are applicable across the range. But so when I personally went to buy an EV this time, now I buy all my companies and all my cars in my company name. Hello, yeah. But when I asked the dealership that would I be eligible as a company for the incentive, so I was said no. So I just did some more research, and it seems that a lot of state level incentives are not applicable to you if you are a company or a partnership, but only if you are an individual. So I feel it really dissuades a lot of people who buy EV vehicles in the company's name for tax purposes from actually buying an EV. So that was the only reason why I did not buy an EV, because I wasn't getting any incentive for it, basically.
All right. Dr. Arun, in terms of challenges, right, India's EV market is supposed to be 500 billion by 2025. I don't know how true it is. And given the growing middle class, we should have seen a lot of two-wheelers on the road already. But we don't see them so much, right? And what do you think is the real issue?
Sorted out.
Yes,
Mic
it
has
is.
to be set right. Can I get it? Can I get it if you don't mind?
Keep that away. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, you're right. In terms of the number of units, we should have really gone further. You've seen the other Southeast Asian markets like Philippines and other places where more and more number of two-wheelers, especially on the battery segments that we are able to see. But I guess, as I said before, let me reiterate again. It's a question of time. These pushes are happening from the government side of it. So it is moving forward. And we are also hopeful to see more cost competitive hybrid cars. So like Tesla's equivalent ones. If I say Tesla, then there'll be a government push. So equivalent of those Teslas domestically manufactured that are available. Having said that, in about 3 to 5 years' time, I guess more number of charging stations are also planned. I was talking to one of the policy makers. They are now rolling out a lot of such private, public, participative charging stations, so which also eventually will boost the services. Now, in the vehicles that we have taken up now for commercial purposes across India, in about 500 to 600 vehicles, if I have to take a range, we have been able to deploy about 30 vehicles in the EV segment, which itself I feel is definitely a good push from where we were about a year back. And, but we are now focusing that on the very, very city modes where the kilometers run is only 80 to 100 kilometers. That's the maximum these EVs could actually go. So one, from the R&D side of it, this needs to really go to about 150 kilometers. Number two is more and more charging stations would eventually come in the next 6 months to 1 year, which will propel this movement further is what we strongly feel.
Yeah.
And as we were talking on the P&L, incidentally, I also did one analysis. EVs aren't really costing too high. Probably the break-even extends by another 12 months maximum. And it is definitely getting competitive. I did not take any incentives into that. If you probably take it, it's more or less like the other one. But do we have a choice in places like Delhi, given the population levels? So there are no choices. So I don't think there could be any discussion whether it is profitable or non-profitable. Push it hard to ensure EVs are in place so that at least our children could be much more better living, or even we can be living better in Delhi.
Let's stay out of the same. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
I have a different point here with regards to the challenge in commercial EVs in India. See, all we see is some push from a lot of startups in the three-wheeler segment. But going about that, the major four giants of India, automobile, commercial vehicle giants, are completely silent on this, right? Tata has, say, come out with Tata Ace, but even then it is 6 to 7 months away from commercialization, right? And other manufacturers are completely silent, right? There's an eerie silence there, right? And those are the people who
because EVs are silent.
No, it's never a chicken and egg story. See, those are the people who have the scale to bring up the numbers that the industry needs, right? Once they step in and then they do it, then only this chicken and egg story will break, and then the ecosystem will develop. The reason behind that is, I presume it might be due to the investment that has been done in the BS6 conversion, and they want to take out the ROA and then come into the EV. I don't know. Maybe that.
Yeah. Yeah, you take a mic so that everybody can hear your point. Thank you.
See, with my experience, I just want to say one thing. It's not like they are trying to be away from this space. Basically, they are trying to explore the alternate fuels. There's a lot of research which is going on CNG, LNG, and now hydro. They are trying to prove these alternate fuels are even better solution than electric vehicle for especially the commercial vehicle space. A lot of investment is going in that space, actually.
Perfect. And I want to come back to you. Yeah, go ahead. I'll come back to you.
You are bang on. We are working with one of the biggies of India for fuel cells. So you are bang on.
Yeah, and taking that forward, Dr. Arun, India also is building on the government side. You see Gati Shakti, and we are building 30, 35 multimodal parks in the next 5 years. Now, when you build multimodal parks, you have a lot of benefits of those. There's going to be a lot of transportation. And these are all enterprise vehicles. These are bigger vehicles. So taking that point forward, is there a roadmap to increase the manufacturing of all the batteries and packs and lithium oil cells that we require? Is there a plan from government to support the ecosystem? Building multimodal parks and getting electric vehicles is the right way, but do we have the back-end infrastructure, the tier 1, the tier 2, to support the investment in 35 multimodal parks?
Yeah, some of you must have participated in the opening session this morning. So brilliant view, and it was really competing private enterprises planning. The way government has planned, the way the road network that he was explaining, the rail network that he was explaining, fabulous. So I was also talking to one of the recommendation committee members with respect to establishment of interconnectivities in these. Their roadmaps are somewhere for 15 years from now. So they aren't really bothered which government is really going to run for the next 15 years and all that. I think the bureaucrats have got a very, very long vision to push the whole thing forward. In my opinion, from the information that have been gathered so far, these connectivities, sub-manufacturings, all these will happen in the next 10 to 15 years of time. We have a bright plan in place with the government is what I feel.
Perfect, perfect. Moving on to Nitin, in terms of the last mile delivery, how do you see the logistics operators playing a role? I mean, as we see more and more, in the morning we heard this, the execution function is going to be outsourced. No matter whether you're an enterprise manufacturer, B2B or B2C, or even D2C, which is again going to the next monster that we are going to hear. And we talk about 10 minutes delivery, 20 minutes. How do you see logistics companies pulling up their socks and investing? And what are the challenges they have?
So I think it was briefly touched upon by all the co-panelists. We all know the benefits of using the EVs, the broad brush application of it, the reduction in emissions, consumption of oil-based fuels, etc. As far as the corporates and the government are all taking steps towards more and more EVs, even still, I think in the last mile delivery or the cargo segment, we are seeing that the adoption of EVs is not very rampant. And the reasons could be varied. I think one of the reasons is also the unavailability of the right kind of vehicle, right? We spoke about the three-wheelers, the L4, L5 kind of vehicles. So as far as, now take for example, in a place like Mumbai, right? You have a three-wheeler and you know that regulations prohibits more than one person in the cabin. So if we have to operate it for our kind of business with the number of deliveries that we have or number of stops that we have, imagine how the productivity drops if your driver has to be the courier, which means he has to go and find a parking space, walk probably 50, 100 meters to the delivery spot, leave the vehicle unattended. So all of these are challenges. Yes, the range issue, range anxiety, the charging infrastructure, all of that is a challenge as of today. And there is a lot of work which is happening to better that situation. Another thing is, like we spoke about, the cost of procurement of the vehicle. So we as an organization are asset light, and we look at most of our assets on the OPEX methodology, right? So when, let's say, a third party procures the vehicle and he has to provide it as a service, today the return on investment for him spans about a 7-year period. So when he is getting into a contract, and it's a short-term contract, he's trying to include all of that onto his monthly rentals. And that becomes cost prohibitive. So it's not an overall ROI, but it is the immediate ROI that is looked at, which makes the unit cost very prohibitive. There has to be a lot of work that has to be done on that. Infrastructure, definitely. Big organizations like us have the infrastructure and the space where we can support charging infrastructure, but things like battery swapping, fast charging, all of these, because our vehicles don't really have the time to wait in a place for 8 hours to charge the battery. The turnaround has to be extremely fast.
Wonderful,
right?
wonderful.
So these are things, if taken care of, yes, definitely it's going to go a long way.
Yeah. I suppose battery swapping is something we really haven't have our fingers wrapped around how to do that, right? Yeah. I would like to go. Yeah,
sorry, one point I would like to add to you is that a lot of last mile delivery takes place by gig riders, basically. and all these guys own their own vehicles. Like if you see like Zomato and you see Gophers and you see Zepto and all these guys. So is the rider who owns his vehicle and not the company? So the rider wants a vehicle that is flexible, as in he can use it for work as well as for his family, as well for XYZ other work. So he's not going to invest in an electric vehicle which you can use only for X purpose. He'll want a vehicle which you can use everywhere. So I think this might need to change, and the people who are like companies like the Zomato or whatever XYZ company, they need to maybe provide a vehicle for the rider, either on a lease or a rent or something like that. That would really help the
There are various schemes that can be partnered. You're right, Hansveer. And most importantly, I think today, most of the youth own a two-wheeler who are already doing these kind of deliveries. So what is the incentive for them to change their existing vehicle to an e-wheeler? Right, the e-vehicle, what is really the incentive for them to change? And I think that is the biggest block. If we can crack this puzzle, I think that's where you will see the spike going up, at least as far as the two-wheelers are concerned. And the second aspect to it, you would have seen, it's also a mindset thing. So a lot of news about an electric bike going into flames and things like that. So there is a certain sense of apprehension in people's minds. And that is something that has to be overcome by the OEMs. That security, that safety, and that consciousness has to be driven down to the people, and that's when you will see this adoption.
Any
Also,
Zepto, Zomato guys sitting here? I wanted to hear their opinion. So, yeah, please take the mic. Yeah, sure. Two of us are paid to discourage, two of us are paid to encourage. What do you want? Where you want to be?
Because the panel itself is very confusing, because we are writing here that panel on deployment of electric vehicles in last mile delivery, and we are talking when Nitin is saying it is a challenge to deploy electric vehicle because a company like Blue Dart, where they have their hubs in Bhiwandi, and they are delivering to so many partners where it is only a single point delivery. Why they can't use electric vehicle? If they want to promote electric vehicles, they can do it.
Perfect.
So as they are saying that they are asset light company and they are going through their promoters or their vendors, so why can't they go to their vendors and ask them to buy an electric vehicle?
That's a very good comment, and that's exactly what we are doing. So let me give you that assurance.
Yes.
Fine, thank you.
Yeah, and great question. You asked at the right time, because I have a question for Jawahar. Is I understand from your delivery perspective, from your last mile delivery for food items, you have in the last 24 months grew from a 0 vehicle in your own fleet to almost more than 100 now. How did you do that? What was the passion? What was the pushing factors there?
Sanjay, it's not 24 months, it's 18 months.
18 months.
Yeah. Right.
Great.
See, the primary driving force was, as it says in our vision, we want to become responsible and sustainable food marketplace which handles 1% of global food. That's what our vision states, right? So the primary driving force is that. And we started this journey, say 18 months back, wherein we had 0 vehicles, 0 EV vehicles in our last mile fleet. All our last mile fleet are completely contracted. We don't own even a single vehicle. We work on an OPEX model, and we move around 1,200 tons of food every day in all 7 states, south and western states of India. So when we decided to move on, the biggest challenge to us was the product. There was no right product available in the market where we can ask our logistics partners to go and get it and deploy it for us, right? So and the logistics partner did not have the bandwidth to go and search for a suitable product. So what we did is we directly started engaging with multiple OEMs, right? Close to 4 OEMs we were directly engaging, and multiple mobility partners. And finally, we have zeroed in on 3 products which completely now we have close to 100 vehicles, 100 EV vehicles have operating daily for us in all of our distribution centers. At this point, I want to say one thing is like we are closely engaging with the climate group, and we have committed on the EV 100 program, which our commitment is 100% of our last mile fleet will be electric by 2030, and 50% of our other fleet, meaning first mile and middle mile fleet, will also be electric by 2030. That's a commitment that we have made with the EV 100 program of the climate group. Having said this, this is not a very easy journey because, as I said, there was no available product, right? All the 3-wheelers that are available at that point in time were like anybody could import batteries from China, anybody will have a powertrain, and everybody will have one BMS. They will assemble it and give it as a vehicle to us, and the vehicle won't even have a CG, proper CG. It will topple on the road, right? Our journey started from there, and now I would say that our unit cost has come down by operating the EVs by 11% comparing to the ICE vehicles.
Perfect. We have 7 minutes left. I have 2 more questions, one for Dr. Arun and one for Hansveer. And Hansveer, I'll come to you first. We see a lot of EV population growing up by 2025, which means there is going to be an issue on the reuse and recycle of batteries and many other parts. So do we have to educate customers, either enterprise or direct, how to dispose this, how to reuse them? How would it come from? Will it be a government mandate, or is it the manufacturers will have in the box itself, or some kind of a mechanism there?
So for starters,
because this is way bigger. This is way bigger than normally what we've been doing for IT products and all.
Definitely. So for starters, electric vehicle batteries basically have a very long life. So manufacturers are warranting these for about 7 to 8 years now, but I'm sure that will go up.
Okay.
And there are even talks of million-mile batteries, which is like 16 lakh kilometers. So the life is going to be very long. So it's going to be pretty like at least 8 to 10 years before this becomes a very serious issue for us. And that will give us enough time for a lot of new technologies coming up to recycle the cells. But more than that, what happens is just because a battery pack is not fit for vehicle use, which is extremely demanding, it doesn't mean the battery pack cannot be used elsewhere. So there's a huge market for second life battery packs, and a lot of companies like Nissan, I believe Chevrolet, Daimler are actually using old battery packs to power their plants. So let's say they have a solar array, and they're using these old battery packs, putting them into a series or whatever, and then they're using that to store energy for use when there's no sunlight. So second use case is very strong for lithium batteries. That would extend the life of the battery by another 5 years. So you're looking at a lifespan of at least 15 years, 12 to 15 years for a battery pack. Once that is done, some battery packs do land up in landfills, but most of these are liable to be sort of recycled at a cellular level, and most of the chemicals and most of the precious metals will be extracted. The Indian government has also launched a scheme. It's called the Battery Waste Management Scheme 2022. And under the scheme, what it does is it puts the onus on the manufacturers. So this includes manufacturers as well as importers of the battery packs. So the onus is on the polluter. So when the manufacturer is selling a vehicle with a battery pack, they have to have in place a system which involves picking up the battery pack and making sure it is disposed of in the right way. And no cells, whether it be a vehicle battery or a mobile battery or any other battery, should land up in landfills.
Thank you. Well done, well done. Dr. Arun, last question to you before we do a quick recap of one sentences, everybody, is the driving experience for consumers. We really haven't talked about the driving experience for a consumer. We talked about a lot of stuff, right? From cost to strategy. So based on the data, and I'm not very sure about it, but EVs do not have gears. I'm not sure whether that's true, whether they have or not. So it provides a different experience of not having a stress. I have driven a gearless vehicle and I never really felt the stress of having a gear and changing it. Just leave it and manage it, right? So is this going to be a critical factor in India which will help a large scale adoption in consumer EVs?
To give a quick answer, yes, it will make a difference. I was initially driving Honda petrol about 5-6 years back. You all know the Honda Civics or Honda Cities, very, very noiseless vehicle. I switched on from there to Audi diesel, and so much of noise inside the car. Audi symbol outside, inside so much of noise. But when I really wanted an automatic transmission, when I moved back from Gulf to India, people were saying only the handicapped will get automatic. Why are you trying? No. I said, so far I'm not yet handicapped. Still, I will try an automatic transmission and drive. So I'm not very sure the Indian mentality at this point in time really need, I'm talking about the commercial vehicles, really need an automatic transmission. But this was the case in passenger. Now slowly moved to automatic in many segments of cars that you would really see in the market. I'm sure experience would be really good without the gears, etc. So it will move in that direction for commercial also.
Fantastic. Starting with you, Nitin, quick 1 minute. Hansveer, we need to chop off 2 minutes left. Quick one.
One benefit of having electric motor is that it's like a fan motor, right? You press the switch and it turns.
Yeah.
So you don't have to change gears to spool the motor up and stuff like that. So it's that much less of a headache. The driver knows that when he presses the accelerator, the car will move. He doesn't have to make sure it's in the right gear, it's in the right setting, right RPM, none of that. Press the pedal and you're on your way. So it's a lot easier for to drive. And we manufacture electric vehicles ourselves. So again, it's just twist and go and there's nothing else involved.
Sure. Thank you. Starting with Nitin, EV success or no?
Yeah, I would go with it, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, there are challenges, but at the end of it, I think the gains are far higher.
Remember, we have to make the gentleman happy there.
Yeah.
Okay? All right. Hansveer.
Definitely. And in answer to the gentleman, I would say that unless we discuss the negatives, unless we highlight the negatives, we'll just keep hiding them under the rug. So the negatives need to be highlighted and addressed and not shunned, basically.
Neglected.
Because one thing I've seen in the EV industry is that there's a lot of cherry picking. So whether it's pro-EV or anti-EV, everyone cherry picks data. We don't want to do that. We want to show a true picture. We want to highlight the issues and we want to solve them and not put them on the rug.
Yeah. Just aside, when your EV is coming out, your own?
So we already have L3 models which are currently in production.
Yeah.
We are working, we also started manufacturing electric bicycles which have just launched basically last week.
Fantastic.
And we're coming up with a two-wheeler as well as a L5 three-wheeler by the end of this year and mid next year respectively.
Sure. Wonderful.
Absolutely. EVs are possible. The only deciding factor is going to be the availability of the product. EVs are profitable. We have to go about it.
Fabulous. Dr. Arun?
In my view, making EV success is actually, we are more interested working on people's safe living, comfortable living, for the future of us, for the future of our children. We will make such initiatives, including EV, successful.
Spoke like an MP now. Thank you.
Couple of years later.
Thank you very much. Amazing job. Charu. Thanks, guys.